right, I'm Kevin Finisterre, and I work for Department 13. I work on a counter-drone platform known as Mesmer. One of the first things people ask me is what Mesmer looks like. This is one of our reference systems that we bring out to customer sites and technology demonstrations. Mesmer is intended to give you situational awareness over a geographic area with regards to particular RC aircraft or drones that are in the area. And additionally, it'll give you the ability to come up with some mitigation options with regards to what you'd like to do with the drones that you detect. One of the first things I want to know when somebody's up speaking to me is who they are and why I care that they're talking to me. In this specific community, I was one of the first people to push the boundaries of vulnerability disclosure and exploit release. I published one of the first SCADA exploits for SciTech back in 2008. I don't have any problem discussing difficult topics. I have no problem talking to you about an ugly baby or something along those lines. And on the SCADAsec mailing list, I spent quite a bit of time debating back and forth about SCADA vulnerabilities and exploits. I was pretty blatantly told that you can't release SCADA exploits, and I wound up doing exactly that. I'm not your friend. I'll tell you some things that are hard to hear. And in that context, I wound up releasing exploits for GE's Prophecy, SciTech, WISE, and Iconics. And I helped make sure that those were put into the Metasploit platform so that they were easily accessible. Dale Peterson noted that this was one of the top 10 SCADA security stories of 2008, and that what I had done was basically taken theory and put it into practice. There were a number of news articles about that incident, highlighting both the extremes of what folks thought about disclosure and exploit release. I spent some time working at Accuvant on a smart grid penetration testing team, and we did a lot of research on the electrical utilities and various equipment that supports that sort of stuff. I had the pleasure of working with what I consider to be one of the better hardware hacking teams out there. One of my teammates, Josh Thomas, came out here to S4 a couple years back with me, and we gave a hardware training class to kind of push some of our knowledge back into your community. A year ago, I gave a talk on breaking into a commercial drone platform by 3D Robotics at the DerbyCon conference. And this is one of the first talks where somebody had outlined the landscape of what it looked like to attack a drone for the purposes of mitigation. I got hired right out of the audience, and I started working for Department 13. We fairly regularly have discussions about what we consider to be drones that we should pay attention to and why. I very quickly realized during these conversations that there needed to be some control of that narrative in order to make sure that everybody's on the same page. One of the first things that came to mind in trying to frame this difficult conversation of a drone threat was the Microsoft Dread model. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, Dread is a fairly subjective model that you can use to weigh and classify particular vulnerabilities in your organization. And to me, it made sense that this would be a really good starting point for classifying drone threats. There's a lot of controversy over the use of Dread. It's been pointed out that it's not actually scientific. But one key takeaway from this is even though it's not scientific, it's a very good starting point to have a discussion for what people care about. Additionally, when thinking about this, I started taking into consideration police use of force models. And I thought that there was really no reason we shouldn't be able to shoehorn drone threats into a police use of force style model. And what you have in those models, for example, is a stair-step approach for the different types of actions. You have an appropriate type of response. And it's generally acceptable that you work laterally across this stair-step model, but in some cases you may want to elevate or go down a stair depending on the threat that you're dealing with. Another way of visualizing threats in law enforcement is a use of force continuum. And again, I felt that there was no reason why we couldn't shoehorn drones into the same sort of model. And what you're looking at here, the way you interpret that is almost like a slice of pie. For any given slice of pie for a threat, you basically work your way out for how you may choose to respond. I couldn't find any reason why Department 13's Mesmer platform couldn't be treated like any other implement, whether that be a firearm or your fist. You have different options as far as how you can respond to a threat. And I really wanted to know what that looked like with regards to an anti-drone platform. So to get on the same page, we kind of need to all be aware of what different drone threats look like. They can come from the ground, they can come from the air, they can come from the water. And depending on what your industry is, your definition of threat may differ from somebody else's. For general aviation, the threat is currently dealing with aircraft either directly hitting the plane or an engine or something along those lines. There's been a number of simulations to help visualize whether or not this is an actual issue. And what you're looking at here is a small drone entering a turbine, and you're seeing the resulting stress that's put on the engine and basically catastrophic failure resulting. Now, if we go back about 6 years ago, there was a gentleman who's currently still in jail that decided it was a bright idea to take a quarter-scale RC jet and fix it with some C4 and fly it at the Pentagon. So that was probably one of the first examples of an RC or drone threat that was actualized. A couple years later, DHS had a private party in which they demonstrated some of what they considered to be threats. And this photo that you're seeing at the bottom of this slide is actually one of their contrived threats. There were a number of pictures that were taken at this event. And the day after the Phantom drone crashed on the White House lawn, the individual that took them was asked to take them down. Now, a lot of people think this sort of stuff is far-fetched and it's completely contrived. The reality of the matter is that we're starting to see this stuff happen in theater now. And fairly recently, we actually had a couple of special forces that were, quote, badly hurt. You can, interpret that on your own, as well as 2 other individuals that were killed with them. And that was basically caused by a drone that was packed with explosives. So these next couple of slides, I'm going to cruise through fairly quickly. There's a number of them. The main point is to give you some visuals around potential threat. This is a DJI Inspire 1 with a grenade canister attached to it and some sort of mechanism to drop said grenade. And again, this intelligence is all over the place if you look for it in the right spot. This is another bit out of the same group that published that last photo. And they've actually highlighted that this might be a bluff. Those might be non-real explosives. But they actually pulled this photo off of a group of individuals that they were already monitoring. So they actually feel it was a credible example of a threat in that case. But the reality of the matter is that off-the-shelf drones are showing up in theater all over the place. This is a standard DJI Phantom 4. Here's another example of one that has a 9-volt battery attached to it, which is meant for the detonator that was attached to it. Most people think of drones as quadcopters, but fixed-wing drones are also a threat. And there are some folks that have a loose idea of what they're doing and are able to at least construct aircraft and attach pretty much whatever they want to them. What you're looking at on this slide is a DIY-style flight controller attached to a DIY aircraft where somebody's got basically a rocket-propelled grenade head attached to it. Fixed wing are probably one of the more emerging threats that are out there. Folks are literally, again, taking explosives and attaching them to aircraft and using them to deliver their payload. There's no shortage of examples if you look around, basically. And the running theme seems to be to take grenades or explosives and attach them to commercially available equipment. This last picture here is a Phantom 2. Probably one of the more noticeable aircraft that are out there, and probably one of the higher proliferated aircraft as well. So the fun thing about this as a problem is these guys are doing this stuff in theater, but they're also starting to come back home. And home might be here in the US, it might be in the UK, as you see on this slide. But there's apparently credible intelligence that we should start seeing some of this stuff occurring domestically. And it seems like it's literally just a matter of time before that occurs. I'm sure some of you guys have seen this threat overview by Sandia. I wanted to point out that if you search this overview, that nowhere in this deck will you find the word drone, UAV, or UAS. It's almost as if it's not a recognized threat. In their presentation, however, they do display a threat profile And I found it interesting to note that drones have the ability to drop right into the higher areas of these threat models based on their capability alone. They have the ability to shortcut time and personnel very easily. They're almost like a force multiplier. Again, this is another example threat model, and again, based on capability alone, you could very easily see where a drone could come right down as a medium or high threat right off the bat. So this is the classic example of somebody shot up my substation. This is probably the most recent event that everybody has in their mind. And it obviously got some folks heated up about what occurred at that plant. There were a number of news articles that came out highlighting that the nation's power grid is highly vulnerable. We've got commentary about how there will definitely be another attack that exceeds this specific attack, and that the grid is basically vulnerable to sharks with frickin' lasers and saboteurs with explosives. So if that sort of stuff is in your mind, I want to circle back again to the reality of what people can do. This is a photo of a gentleman that's attached an AR-15 to a standard RC truck. This guy's a local prankster in Ohio, so he's known for doing things that get people riled up. I don't know that he needs to be added to any particular list after this display, but it should give you a real good idea of what the possibilities are. So I hope that sets the stage a little bit for the potential. But I wanted to point out that this sort of stuff isn't new. This video that's popping up here is one of the earlier videos that I was able to come across. And this guy's basically taken a servo motor and attached it to a Bergen helicopter with his 9mm pistol. And he's somewhere out in the woods basically shooting at a sign in this video. At the time that this was made, that was approximately a $5,000 helicopter. So that was somebody that was really invested in actually doing that experiment. This stuff is hard to think about. But the reality of the matter is, if something like this worries you, you should probably have a plan. This particular drone that you're looking at is nothing special. Anybody with minimal level of RC experience could put that together. Pulling a trigger with a servo is not that difficult to do. So the fun thing for me is that a lot of this stuff is very easy to brush off. At a certain point, it can get a little bit close to home. I know a lot of you folks are utility operators, so I wanted to point out a talk that was at DEF CON this year. Chris Rock, completely unrelated talk to what we're discussing, but he was discussing overthrowing the government, and in the process, he had the need to cut power to a particular area of town. And he decided that what he would do was create a drone called Mr. Choppy. Now, Mr. Choppy is literally a power drill with a couple of saw blades attached to it, and he apparently tested this in his backyard and was able to cut cables. Again, whether or not that's a real threat, I don't know. I've had a number of people tell me that that's pretty unrealistic, so I wanted to point out again, people have been attaching chainsaws and things of that nature to drones for a very long time. This video is really fun. I'll let it play for just a moment. Basically, these guys took a large DJI heavy lift hexacopter, or octocopter rather, and as you can see, hooked up a gasoline chainsaw to it, and then proceeded to fly all over the place, and I think their money shot was cutting a snowman's head off with it. Again, I keep hearing that this is fairly contrived. Mythbusters has even gone into this particular effort, and Jamie Heineman made a quadcopter for trimming his trees, and hooked up a saw blade to it, and was flying around chopping stuff up. So completely possible. Now, these platforms off the shelf also enable folks to have some level of aerial surveillance capability. And if you look on YouTube, you'll find no shortage of people that are flying around power plants and other equipment that could be considered critical infrastructure. This specific video, this gentleman actually goes flying in between the cooling towers. I wouldn't want to be the individual dealing with that at my plant. But again, there's no shortage of this stuff floating around if you look in the right places. I don't exactly know what it means, but again, I think it's something that folks should be taking into consideration with regard to their assets. So this is a video from a couple years ago. There were a couple paparazzi that were trying to get some footage of Paris Hilton's private island. And what I want to show here is what you can accomplish with a very small amount of equipment and a very few amount of people. This is a two-man team, and they've got basically a briefcase-loaded drone with an SLR attached to it. There's a gentleman that runs the FPV camera that actually goes through the lens of the SLR so he can focus and grab his shots, and the other gentleman is the pilot. And what they were able to do was literally fly over the edge of Paris Hilton's beach property and get a number of shots without actually violating her property. So they weren't really trespassing at this point. And as you can see, they were able to get a very good view of the property, and I believe a number of these photos turned up in the tabloids. Again, with the theme of what you can accomplish with a very small amount of people, Praetorian Labs took a Zigbee sniffing rig and hooked it up to a DJI hexacopter and proceeded to fly over a neighborhood with the intent of collecting signals off of various Zigbee devices. And they actually rented this device, so I don't think they really had any concerns to crashing the drone or losing any property as far as that goes. What they were able to do was come up with 700 some odd unique devices in this particular flight and map them out on Google Earth. Now, a number of years ago, this is exactly what got me into drones. I had the plan that I would basically get a drone that had the ability to carry some payload, as well as some sort of aerial surveillance capability, and I would use that to accomplish my nefarious goals. I stumbled upon the DIY Drones Argicopter project, and I learned very, very quickly that it's extremely difficult to keep a payload in the air. And that photo on the last slide there is actually me grimacing in fear as one of my copters got away from me and almost chopped my face off. So back to my goals. I live in Columbus, Ohio. We are a smart grid testbed area, and I was aware that we had quite a bit of Zigbee equipment all over our town. And my intent was to take drone aircraft and use it to locate said equipment. Josh Wright had fairly recently published a framework called Killer Bee, which enabled people to tamper with Zigbee networks as well as to locate specific Zigbee devices. So the plan was to take GPS and hunt down meters and make use of Travis Goodspeed's research on the GoodFet device and his research on extracting AES keys from smart meters. So literally, I would have been able to compromise your mesh after I had located one of your devices. To me, this is literally akin to burglars that were using drones to supposedly break into people's houses. In this case, I'd be using drones to break into your metering network. Now, there are a number of special field service units and maintenance devices that smart grid manufacturers make available to linemen and people that are actually working on this equipment. And one of my other thoughts was to take one of these pieces of equipment, which in this case had the ability to perform remote disconnects, and use a drone to fly over a geographic area, triggering disconnects as I go. And as I understand it, when you turn off enough devices, there can be some catastrophic results. Generally speaking, I don't really know what you guys are talking about, so I'll let you theorize on that on your own. Coming back to the ability to do things with very small amount of resources, I want to point back to the Syrian Airlift Project. This is a group that took open source autopilots and went over to Syria to do some humanitarian aid. The slide that we're looking at here is a picture of their swarm, and they had 15 different aircraft that they were swarming at a time to get their payloads delivered. And the fun thing to note about this is that in that particular area, it wasn't worth shooting rockets at these drones to take them down. The cost to do that wasn't worth the actual threat that was imposed. And what they noted was that literally for them, statistical averages were really what mattered. It was about an attrition rate. What they found was that they could narrow things down to about a 5-minute turnaround time with 2 to 3 men. and they could move approximately 424 pounds of material a night with this cargo conveyor belt, as they called it. And they thought that they could very easily turn that time down to 2 minutes per crew and 1,000 pounds. So again, when you're thinking of contraband or other things, that's a really interesting number to take into consideration. Now, I wanted to frame some of this stuff in an arena that you guys could relate to. So I've taken some contrived examples that you could probably see occurring at a utility location. You guys remember the Pez dispensers? Well, I took and created a servo-controlled Pez dispenser that I could add USB sticks to. And as I understand it, certain parts of this industry have become a little more complacent with certain types of USB devices. And in particular, there are specific versions where you may need to have a USB device present for your equipment to even work. In this example, I know that WinCC Asia requires a specific USB dongle. I know a lot of people know me for Cytex, so I'm going to go ahead and resurrect them a little bit here. I'm aware that they, for example, use licensing dongles. So the fun thought for me on this was, I don't know if you guys remember Sergey Bradis and Travis Goodspeed's talk on Face Dancer, but basically what they provided was a piece of hardware that could give you the ability to fuzz USB devices and subsequently weaponize them. So I thought it was interesting to just take into consideration that some of these USB devices that you may have laying around might not be as trustworthy. That extends to other vendor-specific hardware or accessories. This is a Siemens HMI memory card, which you may have some implicit trust for. Now, on the other hand, if I told you that I had given one of these cards to Dylan Beresford, that might kind of shatter your level of trust, wondering what Dylan's doing with it. Point being, I could take any number of devices and use my Pez dispenser in a drone and airdrop them over your facility and hope that somebody might pick them up and plug them in somewhere. Another example, I'm aware of sensor platforms and cameras that are deployed to help monitor substations and other equipment. And I started wondering, how many drones would it take for me, hovering in front of your cameras or disrupting your sensors, for you to start getting upset? I've got the ability to very accurately place a drone in front of any camera that I want or any other piece of equipment of yours. So when looking up how some of this stuff could be done, I ran across this silly WikiHow article on how to block cameras, and this guy's telling you basically take a real bright flashlight and shine it at the camera. Well, that's great because 3DR Solo has the capability to have a light attached to it, an extremely high-powered light at that, and then I can turn around and use my GPS location waypoints and park this light exactly where I want it, for example, in front of one of your cameras. Just to give you an idea how bright this light is, I'll show you a little bit of this video here. This is one of the tests of the initial versions of this light. And obviously you can see this thing's very bright, and if somebody chose to hover it in front of one of your cameras, you're obviously not going to see anything. Now, I also understand that in some cases people leave windows and doors open. Maybe it's for heat, maybe it's for noise, and emergency stop buttons are laying all over the place. It's not that contrived to think that somebody could potentially fly a drone in a window or a door and hit one of these stop buttons. And I want to point out research from Grasp Lab in Pennsylvania, where they've literally taken small quadcopters and been able to have them navigate through very tiny spaces, literally using only their onboard logic. So this video here shows them demonstrating a quadcopter that has the ability to slalom through different objects that they've set up for in the path or whatever. And then they also move on to show the drone flying through a narrow window. You know, we're a little short on time, so I'll skip that. You guys can dig it up in the online presentation. So again, the main point is I don't think it's completely far-fetched to think that somebody could take a drone and fly it through a window or a door and find one of your emergency stop buttons or find a lever that does something. So to kind of highlight that this is actually possible, I want you guys to see some footage from one of the better FPV pilots in the scene. This guy's name is Sharpoo, And what he's done is he's gone to some old abandoned area, and he's taken his quadcopter and he's doing some extremely aggressive flights through windows and doors in really narrow spaces. So this will give you an idea of what some pilots' capabilities are. And forgive that ad, that is just terrible. Main point again, this guy is dipping and diving through all of these little tiny windows with ease. So to think that somebody could do that with an open window at a plant or somewhere else, I don't think it's that very far-fetched at all. So again, people with drones around your equipment may be just an annoyance, but it may be something a little bit further. And the reality is there are a gradient of potential threats, and I think that we should start thinking in gradients of potential response as well. And what this slide is here is a reinterpretation of the police use of force model that I showed earlier, where I've superimposed different types of drone threats. And the same rules apply. You'll want to laterally operate across the different levels in the threat model, or in some cases you may want to actually elevate up. So a simple example, if you take the green line, we've got a Parrot AR drone, which might be considered to be a nuisance, and you may want to choose to simply detect it. You may want to choose to monitor its video, or you may choose to go up a level and actually start actively trying to mitigate that drone. Now, the thing to take note of is the higher up this pyramid that you go, you're going to require a lot more effort and money to actually make the mitigations occur, whether that's GPS jamming or spoofing or specific custom-tailored exploits for a particular branded drone. Now, again, this is another example of how you could visualize threats. This is a police use of force continuum, which has been converted for drones. And again, as I said before, you just look at this as a slice of pie. So for a particular type of drone threat, you work out that pie and figure out how you'd like to respond. The key to this for me is that this is really a choose-your-own-adventure style effort. And everybody needs to take their own threats into consideration and try to figure out what the appropriate mitigation approaches are. So I apologize for this wall of text. You'll have to probably look at this online. This is basically the wording for a threat model. It's a modified version of Microsoft's Dread that I call Dream. What I've done is I've dropped the D value at the end and replaced it with a mitigation value. And what the mitigation value is subjective, arbitrary meaning for people in your organization to help assign what a threat actually means to them. The other categories came right out of Dread. The wording was modified a little bit to make it more appropriate. This is an extremely subjective example of how you could fill out a dream threat model. And I've taken each one of the categories and come up with gradient versions of each type of threat. For example, for damage, no impact. You don't care that this drone is in your area, versus serious injury or death, where somebody maybe detonates an IED or something like that. So the goal is basically you weight your potential threats and you use your perception and have some subjective conversations about what things mean in your organization. And at the end of the day, what you'll come up with are the various performers that you care about. Maybe toy drones you just flat out are not worried about, whereas some of the more highly proliferated things like DJI Phantoms, they are on your threat model on your radar. And then the flip side of that is there's a lot of agricultural and commercial products that, again, you just may not care about at all. What I've done is I took 25 different drones and ran them through this model with my subjective weightings. And again, I apologize, you probably can't see this wall of text. Main point to take away is on the right-hand side, you can see that these drones have been grouped into different classifications of how much I care about them. Green, I don't care about. Red, I really care about. Now, within the threat model, what I'm able to do is, if there's something that I feel should not pose a big risk, I'm able to use very low values in the different categories. And when they average out, it ultimately winds up placing those drones in a low ranking. Flip side of that is you can use arbitrarily high values in the mitigation category to do the exact same thing and make sure that a drone is ranked high on your threat. Bottom line is really, this is going to be a lather, rinse, repeat sort of exercise with multiple individuals in your organization to figure out how to accurately categorize the threats that you guys care about. The problem is right now, though, is that there's not a lot of threat models that are out there. Very few people are discussing this stuff. David Kovar is one of few that I'm aware of that are doing this currently. David recently presented at Usenix his threat model. And he and I discussed our models together, and what we found was that his is a larger, more encompassing model, but my model was able to serve as two different elements in his model, one being the occurrence probability estimator and another being the severity estimator. So at the end of the day, you're going to wind up deploying some sort of a solution, whether it's a jammer, whether it's a net gun, or whether it's something like Department 13 has. You'll ultimately implement something. And your threat model will help you determine if what you implemented actually makes sense. And for some people, a net firing bazooka gun may be what you need. For other people, maybe it's actually a jammer. At some point, regardless of which system you implement, you're going to wind up with a drone or an operator in your presence. And you're going to really need to figure out what to do with it at that point. And I want to point out that this is definitely not the end of the game for you. Now, I know some of you folks are ready for me to wrap this stuff up. So I'm going to dive back in a little bit with some of what David has been doing. And David's one of the few folks that's mentioned that there are various artifacts and evidence on the drones, the transmitters, and the various accessories that people use to pilot them. So we have a forensic effort that we're trying to put together at Department 13 to better understand how to handle drones that have been used maliciously and figure out how to be able to get log files and things of that nature that can be used in a court case. So I want to take a moment for a small public service announcement. DJI is one of the larger drone manufacturers that are out there, and they've recently said in some press releases that they will do what they can to help with law enforcement efforts for drones that have been used for attacks or whatever. For me, the problem with this is that DJI is really not putting forth the best recommendations or solid solutions for doing this sort of stuff. And quite honestly, some of the things that I've seen recommended are just downright amateur level. So one of the things that I'm aware of is the current suggested technique for obtaining log files off of a DJI drone is to power it on in read-write mode. And you actually have to enter a special mode in the drone while it's on. I don't think I really need to discuss with you guys why you shouldn't be doing that. If you're even remotely trying to have something usable in a court case, I suggest you take a moment to think about the ramifications of powering up something and accessing it in read-write mode. Really what needs to happen is folks need to pony up and buy the proper equipment, the proper software, and make sure that they're analyzing things in a semi-forensically safe fashion. Get yourself Sleuth Kit. It's open source. If you got money, buy in case. But absolutely by no means should you be copying things in read-write mode directly off of a drone. So again, this is a pig that's hard to put lipstick on. It's an interesting problem set, and unfortunately, until the community comes together and puts forth some tools to help in this effort, it's going to be difficult for us to move forward with this sort of stuff. And what I've noticed is that unfortunately, some of the only tools that are available for analyzing log files are online. And again, I don't think I need to discuss with you why you should not be uploading log files that are going to be used in a court case online to some random untrusted location. So with DJI specifically, there is one open source project called DATCon that somebody has gone through a reverse engineering effort and subsequently created a tool to read DJI log files. So the problem with this is that every single one of these log files is basically a unicorn. Every vendor needs to be reverse engineered, and somebody has to release a tool in order for people to be able to analyze this data. So unless the drone vendors are actually cooperating like DJI implied that they were, this is just a really ugly baby that we all have to deal with together. It's honestly going to be a lot of work to continue to frame these threats and figure out how we deal with them moving forward, but ultimately we're all in this together. So I wanted to put forth my threat models for you guys to download and edit. And I encourage you guys to continue this conversation of how do we actually frame drone threats and trying to figure out what they mean to us. That's all I've got for you guys. I've got my contact information up on this slide. You guys can feel free to come contact me after the presentation. This is a Mesmer platform demonstration. So I'll go ahead and let this video play, and that's all I've got for you guys.
So Mesmer is a counter-drone solution. In fact, I would say it's the counter-drone solution. It is the only non-kinetic means in order to control your airspace and control the drones. It works by a technique called protocol manipulation, where we actually talk the language of the drone. That allows us to do things like safely land it, to do things like precision landing, or do passive video feed tapping. We can look at the telemetry or any of the sensors that are on the drone. We'll have access using this technique called protocol manipulation. So some of the use cases that we've seen so far is whether it's in theater, so you've got operations going in a country and you want to protect yourself from commercial drones. I mean, they're essentially the Air Force for the corpsmen or the militias or the terrorist groups. They're actually now having access to a fully functional Air Force with commercial drones. The drone market in a whole, by 2020, will be over a $100 billion market. We see the counter-drone market growing very fast. The reason why it's growing fast, and essentially it's just over a $1 billion market right now, but we think it's going to grow in excess of that over the next 2 or 3 years, because the more drones get out there, the more people will realize they need a counter-drone solution to prevent and secure their areas of interest.